I would like to acknowledge that this video is being filmed on the traditional lands of the Wurrundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people who may be watching this video today. Hi everyone, my name is Steph, this is the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. This is my reading week from the 9th until the 13th of April and I read a total of 8 things this week, 2,699 pages, and my yearly reading total is 167 books. There was a significant portion of rereads that happened this week as well as binge reading another author. You know, I was on holidays, so I read what I wanted to. For the first few days of this week, I was finishing my reread of the Green Creek series by TJ Klune. So that included books 2, 3, and 4 of the series, which I'll talk about in just a minute. I did film a members only vlog for this reread, well, for the reread of these 3 books in particular, which I'm hoping that I have edited and uploaded already, and I'll leave that linked on the screen for my members. Otherwise, it will be coming very soon, where I react to rereading these books, which basically made me bawl my eyes out. If you're unfamiliar with the Green Creek series, it is an werewolf shifter epic, absolutely epic story. It spans decades from first book to final book, and each book follows a different couple, but we spend a lot of time with the main characters in every single book. So Ravensong is book 2. This one follows Gordo and Mark. Gordo is a witch and he was originally the Bennett family witch. And when they left Green Creek when he was a child, he basically cut ties with them. And he grew up and he inherited the local town garage where he works with his friends, and he has really bitter feelings towards the Bennetts. However, in Wolfsong, we find that they begin to reconnect and rebuild sort of those found family bonds that they initially had. And we know that he had something with Mark Bennett, who is the brother of the alpha of the pack. However, that time separated caused them to, not pursue anything further. And this is them rekindling that. A good portion of the first part of this book actually takes place parallel to a story that takes place in the first book. So you do have to read both stories. And in the first book, we don't get the perspective of the group of characters that leaves Green Creek. And that includes Gordo and Joe and Carter and Kelly. And so we get Gordo's perspective of the years that they were away from Green Creek. As I said, it is a second chance romance. Both the heroes in this, I think, are 40 plus, which is awesome. And I love them dearly. And it is a very, very slow burn, but it is so worth it because we see this family, or this found family, trying to draw themselves back together after that period of separation and dealing with everything that they are going through. Which brings me to Heartsong, which is my favorite book in the series. I've made no secret of this one. I absolutely love the 2 main characters in this story and what they have to go through, which again, tissues, all the tissues. This is Robbie and Kelly's story. So we met Robbie in the first book in Wolfsong when he was the liaison for the temporary alpha of all, Michelle Hughes, and he came to Green Creek to liaise with the Bennetts, and he ended up staying because he became quite loyal to Ox. He's this young guy in his 20s. He has never really had a pack of his own. He's had quite a traumatic past experience. We find out more about that. His mother was killed. And he's never really had his own place, and he found that with Ox and the Bennetts. When this story begins, we find that he's back with Michelle Hughes and her pack, and we don't quite know why. And Robbie doesn't tend to reference the Bennetts or Ox or any of those people from, he's spent years with them. So we know straight away something is not quite right and that someone is possibly tampering with his memories. And so as he begins to uncover that and become increasingly more concerned that things are not what they seem, he does eventually reconnect with the Bennett pack, and he doesn't remember them. And in particular, he doesn't remember the relationship he had with Kelly, who is the middle of the Bennett sons. And it's heartbreaking and just, I don't even have words, because Robbie had found a family and then he had it taken away from him and he doesn't remember it. And he's trying to find his way back to that. Both heroes are absolute cinnamon roll heroes. They are just such sweethearts and they quite literally adore each other. Kelly is Ace, which is another really interesting addition to the story to see how that plays out in their relationship and how much Robbie and Kelly mean to each other. And I love this book. And then the final book is Brothersong, because I didn't read the love song novellas this time around. I just wanted to read the main novels. This one is Carter and Gavin's book, and Carter is the oldest of the Bennett brothers, and this is the first and only book that we get in the series that is told from the perspective of one of the Bennetts, so it's all from Carter's perspective. At the end of the previous book, Carter had just realised that he has found his mate, and then his mate is gone, and he spends a good portion of the next year he leaves his family and he tries to track down Gavin. And this comes with a great cost because the werewolves are pack creatures and they have tethers that keep them tied to their humanity. And the longer that he's away from his pack and his tether is his brother Kelly, the less his inner wolf remembers that and their threat of becoming an omega. So this lone wolf that really has the potential to do quite a lot of damage. The longer he spends away from his family, the threat of that sort of looms quite largely over his head. But what we see is that Carter, is very dogged in his pursuit of his mate, and he had previously not considered himself attracted to men at all. All his relationships had been with women, so he's working through a lot of that. Although the really cool thing about this whole series is that it's stated very early on that werewolves are very fluid in their sexuality. It's not a big deal, like there's no hang-ups over it. Carter just had never considered that as part of his identity, and so he's working through that while working through the loss of his mate and trying to find him. And then of course we have the big massive showdown for the whole series as well, against sort of the person who's been pulling the strings the whole way through. And as I said, bring all the tissue boxes because by the end of it, you're going to need them. But I do love the resolution that we get at the end, and it feels like a complete story. And the one thing that I can say with certainty is that this actual whole series, there is not a book in here that I don't enjoy. And I love a lot of paranormal romance series in general, but this one has to be up there as my favorite because consistently I love every book in the series. All right, now that I've waxed lyrical about the Green Creek series for a very long time, the other books that I read this week included Big Deck Energy by Kim Lorraine. I actually saw this on Charles's channel when he was interviewing Stella Hunter, who is Kim Lorraine, but Stella Hunter is the name she uses for audio narration, and she had narrated this story that she'd written alongside Shane East, and it was a duet recording and it sounded really good, so I decided to read it straight away. It's a contemporary romance with sports elements because the hero of the story is a British hockey player. His name is Ethan, and he ends up meeting this woman on an online dating app that he's part of helping to promote as part of his team's contract. And they have this very snarky banter that goes backwards and forwards. They don't meet each other for ages, but they connect over snarky banter and then real talk. And as they begin to connect and they decide to meet, they really hit it off. They get along really well. He doesn't tell her that he's a professional hockey player. He keeps that on the down low because he wants something that's real. He doesn't want it to be tied to his professional identity. And she is an interior designer or something like that. And she ends up losing the job that she has, which she figures out is not a job that she really wanted to keep anyway, and gets a new job. And as it turns out, she is hired to help design the interior spaces of homes for the players on this hockey team. And she begins to think that this is a huge conflict of interest when she finally realizes who Ethan is. It was so good, and the audio narration for this was fantastic. I read it and listened to the audio at the same time. Highly recommend. Then I picked up the Time Served series by Onley James. There are 3 books currently out in this series. It does link into her Elite Protection series of books as well. So a lot of the characters in there have some crossover, so be aware of that. The first book is Endangered Species, and this one follows Nikki, who works for the Elite Protection Services company, but is wrongly imprisoned when he's framed for some cyber crimes that he didn't commit. Inside, he is placed in a cell with his former stepbrother, who he knew for about a year at one point, but then Cy was accused of killing his father and put into prison, and so they haven't seen each other for the longest time. So this one is a step-siblings romance, which I honestly could not have told you is something that I would have picked up and enjoyed at any point, but I do like Nikki as a character from when I'd met him in the previous series, so I was willing to give it a shot. It is an age gap romance. And this one really sets up the rest of the series in that a lot of the characters we meet while they're initially in this federal prison. The second book is Dangerous Breed, and this one is about Preacher and Memphis. So Preacher was one of the prisoners who was serving time with Cy, and he's now out of prison. He is trying to just live a very quiet life. He's done that for 6 months, and he ends up working for Cy, who does a lot of work rescuing abused animals and also working with people who are child victim advocates. While they're on a job Preacher ends up rescuing this 12-year-old boy called Knox from his brother. And then he meets another one of Knox's brothers who hasn't seen his family for about 10 years. Memphis left his family who were physically abusive to him, who nearly killed him, and, you know, didn't look back. But he's the only other family now that Knox has that's not an absolute dirtbag. He knows he's going to have to look after Knox, but he doesn't quite know what to do. And as it turns out, both Knox and Memphis are still in danger from their family. And so Preacher begins to look after them, and they work together alongside Elite Protection Services group to make sure that they both stay safe. And then the third book in the series is Domesticated Beast, and this one follows Javier, who is an ex-con who served time with Cy and Preacher, and he had previously spent some time working for his uncle, who is a Mexican gun runner. Now that he's out, he's living in LA, he's working alongside Cy and Preacher in terms of rescuing animals and also working as a child victim advocate. And that's when he meets Bowie, who storms into a police station and basically lets it rip at the detectives who were supposed to be investigating Bowie's rape. So the book actually opens with Bowie dealing with the after effects of being raped. He's in hospital, so be aware of that going into it. That's a huge trigger. The police can no longer do anything about it because the man who raped Bowie is the son of someone with diplomatic immunity. Bowie is, rightly so, furious, and he lets the cops have it. Javier realizes that he can't get this guy out of his head. We find out that Bowie is a ballet dancer. He had a role as a soloist, but because of everything that happened to him, his trauma and the way he's dealing with it, he's now lost his spot as a soloist, which is devastating for him. He finds safety and security with Javier, and it's their story. Do not go into these books if you don't want to deal with, you know, quite heavy topics, lots of blood, murder, gore, all of that sort of stuff. It's all in here, but I really enjoyed the book, and the third book was my favorite because I really loved the interplay between Bowie and Javier. They were just really fascinating characters together. And then the final book that I read this week was actually a recommendation from JT, who is Bree from In Love and Words' husband. He had recommended Columbus Day by Craig Allinson to me because we were recommending sci-fi books to each other. And this is the first book in the Expeditionary Force series. This one was an interesting book. I did really enjoy it, and I'll talk about something that I noticed at the end after I've sort of talked about what the book is about. So we meet Joe, who is on leave from the army around Columbus Day, and this happens to be the day that Earth is attacked by aliens, by the Ruha. Joe and some of the people in his small town end up capturing one of the Ruha and then end up handing it off to the authorities when a second group of aliens come to save them, and this is the Kristang. The Kristang eventually decide to recruit humans to fight in this intergalactic war that they have between the Kristang and the Ruha. Joe is shipped off to another planet. He receives some training. Then he serves as a part of a peacekeeping force for a Ruha colony. And he ends up meeting and spending time with some of the Ruha. And he begins to have this nagging suspicion that things are not quite what they seem. And so the first 50% of the book is him being involved in this, sort of feeling very uneasy about the whole thing, and then realizing that perhaps maybe he's on the wrong side of the war. Literally at the 50% mark, this book flips and becomes something well, not completely different, but it had a completely different feel to it. So in the second half of the book, Joe is actually taken prisoner, and he ends up meeting this very snarky artificial intelligence that begins to show Joe how he and this little group of humans that Joe has managed to collect can change the course of this war for humans, because basically the humans are now become slaves for the alien races for this war that they're fighting. I have to say I really enjoyed the second half of the book a lot more than the first half of the book, which is not to say that I didn't enjoy it, just they're very, very different styles of storytelling. Plus I always really like a snarky artificial intelligence. It's just a total thing that I have. So the first part is very much on the setup of everything that's going on. So it's quite heavy in sort of that detail. And then the second part feels a lot more like an adventure sci-fi story. So it was really cool, and I'm really glad that I read it. A couple of things I would say: if you are not American, you might roll your eyes at a few bits and pieces, which is what I did, which is just, you know, par for the course sometimes with books like this. So be aware of that going into it. But I did really enjoy what ended up happening with this story in the end. So at some point I'm hoping to get to the next book in the series. So thank you very much to JT for recommending that to me, because I had never heard of it. All right, so those are the books that I've read in the last week. In the comments, feel free to let me know if you've read any of them or if you're planning on picking them up, or feel free to share something that you have been reading and enjoying. Over the weekend, I am participating in the Dark Romance Readathon, so there'll be a separate vlog. So I started that on the 15th on the Friday, so that'll span Easter weekend, and there should be a vlog coming out for that after this video. If you want to let me know that you're here but you don't want to leave a comment, feel free to leave a green heart emoji for Heartsong down below. Otherwise, I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.